What you wear says a lot about you. Personality, style choices, power level. For characters in film, literature, television, video games, the theatre, it can mean a lot more than that. The clothes a character wears is generally considered shorthand for all sorts of things such as what the character symbolises, themes of the film, and so on. So costumes are actually incredibly significant and can describe a whole lot without actually needing words to say it. What I'm hoping to do in this video is to describe the importance of costume in film, including things such as historical influences, the subtle information it might bring across about a character, and just how important it overall is to what the film is trying to say. So with pantomime season in full swing, it seemed to make sense that this video should be about the 2015 Kenneth Branagh version of Disney Cinderella. Cinderella as an overall story has many iterations worldwide. One of the versions that is harkened back to the most and is probably considered the quintessential Cinderella story is that of Charles Perrault's iteration called Cinderellon, written in 1697. This version had many of the more recognisable parts added to it, such as the pumpkin, the fairy godmother, and the glass slippers. It also is a version which the 1950s original Disney Cinderella film, the animated version, was based on. Both the 1950s and the 2015 Cinderella films are set in a kind of pseudo-Victorian setting with no specific time period and a bit of an amalgamation of costumes and periods and all that kind of thing. Naomi Dunn, the makeup artist for the 2015 Cinderella film, said in an interview with Harper's Bazaar that while studying the original 1950s Disney film, they decided that it was kind of set in the 1840s as a kind of late Georgian, not quite Victorian, but almost there sort of setting. I personally think it might have some more elements from the 1870s, specifically looking at the Ugly Sisters, but the Victorian period is a long period of history where fashions changed in all kinds of ways. So you get this kind of weird amalgamation of Victorian styles that are all Victorian but all very different, and you get a generic sort of, Victorian look. So, in the 2015 Cinderella film, we've already got influences from the mid-19th century, from the 1840s kind of onwards, the mid-20th century from the 1950s Disney film, and also you have various influences from modern day interpretations and designers and so on. So going on to the characters. Out of all the characters in the film, Ella's costumes are perhaps the most non-specific and kind of fall into the realm of fairy tale fantasy. They don't really have a specific time period in which they're based on, although various elements can be sort of attributed to certain time periods in history. Obviously elements have been pulled from one period to another to create the overall fairy tale peasant girl look. Starting with the dress that perhaps gets the most screen time is Cinderella's peasant dress. Historically, the colour blue and various other pastel colours are attributed to the idea of femininity, the natural world, and freshness and beauty and innocence and youthfulness. Basically everything that Ella is supposed to represent.
Because you are young and innocent and good.
The actual shape of the dress is quite hard to pin down. It harkens back to an older period of the sort of early Georgian era of the 1700s, what with the tapered bodice and the 3/4 length sleeves. The free-flowing nature of the skirt that she wears leads to a slightly later design of the Georgian period, where it's starting to meld into the classical era, where clothing became less restricted and more free-flowing and open. So you have this concept of being restricted and this concept of being free-flowing and free-moving for what Ella's life essentially is. She starts off with a nice life, she can kind of do what she wants, she's got this lovely family and so on, and she eventually is full on restricted, isn't allowed to go to the ball, is trapped up in the attic, and so on and so forth. So that's all kind of represented in her clothing. Also, it should be noted that Sandy Powell, the costume designer for the 2015 Cinderella film, said in an interview with Vogue that she wanted to create this image of the dress starting out very nice and very sort of well put together and so on, and eventually have it become degraded, worn out, and tired and messy. So all that is symbolic through the clothes that she wears. Ella's primary dress falls to her shins, unlike that of Lady Tremaine's dresses, which are all down to the ankles. By having a shortened dress, you create a sense of childlike and youthfulness and innocence. It basically makes it look like a younger girl's clothing, and kind of again creates this illusion of innocence and naivety, again everything that Ella stands for. The whole idea of opposites is highlighted in a scene that I really like, which is after Ella's father has just died and the family is in mourning. Ella is seen wearing a small little black ribbon in her hair, while Lady Tremaine is decked out in glorious black. Both of them are showing a public display of grief. Lady Tremaine is still classy and fashionable and very full on. She wants people to know that she is in mourning. Whereas Ella's little black ribbon is much more quiet and homey and subtle. It's a much more contained symbolism of her grief, and feels no need to sort of exude it out to the world around her. She's showing her respects, but doing it on a much more subtle, contained way. So the dress everyone's talking about is, of course, the ball dress. In the film they actually made 8 different versions of the dress for various different scenes, like going up and down stairs and dancing and so on. Let's talk about the enormity of the skirt of the dress, which basically envelops every scene that it's in. It takes over every shot and you simply cannot ignore it. It eats up staircases, carriages, princes when she's dancing, which in a way is a really good thing for the character of Cinderella to have. She's spent the majority of the film as a weak, timid, mild-mannered servant girl. She is basically reduced to this very small, meek figure. To then suddenly have this large enveloping dress which takes over all the scenes she's in and makes people turn around to look at her, it actually is incredibly empowering. To be empowered as she is, it fills her with a sense of strength, self-worth, confidence. It's this whole idea that confidence makes you appear stronger and more attractive.
They're all looking at you.
Believe me, they are all looking at you.
Lily James, the actress who plays Cinderella, in an interview with Vogue said that when she first put on the dress she felt both empowered and scared, and she decided to use these emotions she had as the emotions for what Cinderella would be feeling. The idea of being both empowered and scared is essentially what Ella feels towards the end of the film when she confronts her stepmother. She is scared. She knows that she is going to have an awful life if she stands up to her stepmother, but at the same time she's empowered because she is stopping the stepmother from taking over the kingdom, from ruining the prince's life and generally making everyone miserable. This is where her agency and her empowerment comes from, and it all stems back from the original moment when she has that point in the dress in the ball scene. She gets that feeling of she can do things, she is empowered, she does have strength.
I'm frightened, Mr. Lizard. I'm only a girl, not a princess.
And I'm only a lizard.
Unlike the other dresses of the ballroom scene, Cinderella's dress is perhaps the most simplistic. This air of simplicity creates an element of honesty, of being laid bare, of like, this is what Cinderella really is inside and is being just projected outwards to the ball for everyone to see. Unlike the stepsisters' dresses, are symbolising the simple, honest goodness that Ella encompasses. This idea of simplicity is echoed back in her peasant dress. No other characters in the film have this sort of very simplistic style. It's a style entirely Ella's own, and it reflects the attitude she has, the whole idea of have courage and be kind. It's an uncompromising nature that she has, and it's entirely her own. No one else in the film looks like Ella, and that's why the prince is almost enamored with her, because there isn't anyone else like Ella.
We must simply have courage and be kind, mustn't we?
Yes. You're right.
In shape, the dress is very reminiscent of the huge wide skirts of the 1860s. You'll recognise these in films like Gone with the Wind and so on. What's interesting about the 1950s Disney film is Walt Disney wanted the Cinderella ball gown to be based off modern fashions of the time, specifically Christian Dior collections. Sandy Powell has stated that in the 2015 film's costumes, she wanted them based off the idea that the 1940s, 1950s are making a Victorian film. So you've got this 1940s, 1950s interpretation of Victoria era clothing. So you don't have a historically accurate interpretation, but you have this modern day interpretation of how the 1940s and 1950s might have interpreted the Victorian era clothing. So it's not accurate at all, but it signifies that Cinderella stands out to the prince. She is a diamond in the rough, and again it harkens back to that whole idea that Cinderella is one of her own, there is no one else like her. So talking about the prince, or Kit as he's referred to in this film, a nice shorthand that film and cinema and all sorts tend to do is to show that characters are meant to be together by having them both wear similar colours or references to each other's costume. Just something simple or subtle just to show that they are paired together. Specifically in the ball scene, the prince is wearing white, making him stand out from the rest of the gentlemen in the ball. He's the prince, he's meant to stand out. However, he does have blue trim on his cuffs and subtle trimmings which make reference to Cinderella. No one else is wearing the same blue as Cinderella except the prince. So when they dance together, they look like they match. They look like they've purposefully made an effort to look like they're wearing matching outfits. It's actually done on purpose to show they are meant to be together. They match on every level, including their clothes, so why wouldn't they make the perfect couple? So I mentioned the whole thing about Sandy Powell liking the idea of the 1940s concept of Victorian wear. Well, this is basically the entire concept of Lady Tremaine's wardrobe. Her outfits are classy, they're fashionable. She is quite easily the best dressed person in the film. And as I mentioned earlier, Disney himself originally looked at Christian Dior couture wear as an inspiration for the 1950 Cinderella film. So you've got this whole reference where a character is basically like, yeah, we'll go for the 1950s couture wear and just say it looks Victorian.
One gown for Anastasia, one for Gisella, and one for me. À la mode parisienne.
As I said, Lady Tremaine is easily the best dressed person in the film. She is stylish, she has colour and class. She doesn't have any of the traditional fairy tale wear of Cinderella or the nouveau riche look of the stepsisters. Lady Tremaine's look and styling is based off the likes of Marlene Dietrich and Joan Crawford. The whole kind of 1940s film noir aesthetic with the whole padded shoulders, tapered waists, sort of pointed bosoms, which is incredibly anachronistic of the 19th century and that whole Victorian idea. But that's not what Sandy Powell and the costume designer is going for. Shoulder pads enhance the silhouette. There's a reason that in the 1980s, when they became popular, specifically for women, it was referred to as power dressing. They broaden your shoulders and give you a more masculine figure. They make you take up more space and give you a more powerful look. To be manly is considered powerful in our society. It's this whole idea of taking up space that Lady Tremaine kind of exudes. These huge skirts, these shoulder pads, giant hats, they take up space, and that means she is powerful, she is strong, she is taking up the scene that you are watching. The character herself is empowered, she is a strong and powerful woman, and she strikes this figure in the way she dresses. Although she's the villain of the piece, she does have her own reasons for behaving the way she does. Whether or not these are good reasons is debatable. She is cool, calculating and driven, primarily by money and also by the idea of status. She wants to be secure in her life, she wants her children to be secure, which is a fair enough reason. However, how she goes about it is, again, debatable. But she looks fabulous while doing it anyway.
Are you threatening me?
Yes.
Lady Tremaine wears a lot of jeweled colours, so these are sort of dark purples and dark greens and blues, and they're considered much more adult, much more sort of senior in their kind of appearance. Again, this whole idea of opposites with Cinderella. She is older, she is mature, she is a proper woman. These colours are also generally associated with more villainous characters. Again, they lack the whole idea of innocence, and so it's a good way to represent this. The tones, again, are much more regal and empowering and solitary. She is a single mother, and she is the matriarch of this family, and she's gonna look fabulous while doing her stuff. Obviously, Lady Tremaine wears a lot of green. In Western culture, this is shorthand for the very simple idea of green with envy. Envy is an emotion which occurs when a person lacks another's superior qualities. So Lady Tremaine is envious of Ella's innocence and goodness and niceness.
Why? Because you are young and innocent and good, and I...
And she's envious of the relationship Ella has with her father. This is shown through several scenes in the film. And it's part of the reason why Lady Tremaine behaves and treats Ella the way she does. She's just envious of her, and this is reflected in all the green outfits she wears throughout the film. A really nice touch that Sandy Powell mentioned in an interview was that she wanted the whole Step family to all be seen wearing flowers. So flowers have this really nice motif where they all kind of match each other. You've got the stepsisters matching the stepmother because they've all got flowers on. However, all the flowers are all very different. Flowers represent a variety of things depending on what kind of flowers they are and the styling of the flowers. Ella even has flowers on her peasant dress, and these are very sort of natural, nice, pink, sweet, innocent looking flowers. However, you've got the slightly gaudy, yellow, silly looking flowers of the stepsisters, which shows this whole idea of gaudy, nouveau riche, not quite classy look. And then you've got these really spiky, sort of threatening looking flowers on Lady Tremaine. Again, they all match because they're flowers, but they at the same time all represent the characters differently. In fact, a lot of Lady Tremaine's outfits are various flowers, but again, they're considered much more spiky and dangerous. It's something Sandy Powell specifically wants to get across. She's threatening, she's an imposing figure, and she is not afraid to go out of her way to cause trouble for people. I even think that when she wears her ball dress, although it's not covered in flowers, it kind of looks like one of those carnivorous plants that could very well eat and devour Ella if she really wants to. I'm basically saying Lady Tremaine is Audrey too. So yeah, you've got a lot of different costumes in this film, and they all represent different things. You've really got the whole idea of opposites with Lady Tremaine and Cinderella, as well as the idea of motifs and colour and the stylization, this whole kind of sexy film noir woman who is a villain, but she has her reasons for being villainous, and so on and so forth. Costume really enhances these characters, and especially in a film where it's about a girl who gets a magic dress that lets her go to the ball, you kind of need important costumes for that sort of film. Considering it's a film based on a late 17th century French story, based on a 1950s animated interpretation of that story, done as a live action version by the same company, you're gonna get some interesting interpretations. And I really like this film for the costumes. I think they're really nice.